civil unrest is going on in the city of Los Angeles and across the country, and cities all over the country, due to the ICE raids and people's reactions in the streets. So we're going to talk about that. It's a hot topic, very hot topic. I'm sure at some point we'll say something unsavory and we might get canceled before we even really took off.
Probably. But
hey, I realized something from the last episode. This is going to be officially episode 21, even though it's an emergency pod.
Yeah.
I realized something I said last podcast that made me cackle a little bit, and that we're in the top percentile of all podcasts to ever exist, and we're just inching closer to the top.
Yeah.
Now we are at the bottom percentile of views, and that's okay. But I'm happy to continue doing this, and this is the emergency pod. This is our first one. Breaking news. Breaking news typically, though, it's like they release it as it happens. We're about a week behind.
It's not live coverage. Well, I mean,
we're still...
It's day 7, right?
It's day 7.
Right?
So I wouldn't say we're behind, but for our release schedule, this is pretty quick because we just released our video yesterday.
Yeah.
Which would have been June the 12th.
The 11th.
June the 11th. June the 11th. And today is Friday the 13th.
Nice.
Oh, on that note, my wedding anniversary is coming up, so that's but let's get into it. This is in summary, if you don't know what's going on, if you've been sleeping under a bridge, there has been huge backlash and resistance to the Trump administration's handling of ICE. So, to my knowledge, the administration was unsatisfied with the level of border detention or immigration type detentions, right? When the Trump administration came into office, the stated focus from their border czar, for example, Tom Homan, was we want to delete. Well, I'm sure they want to do that too. They would like to deport illegal immigrants, specifically in targeted investigations of criminals who have violent criminal history, and stuff like DUI was something that they were also going to deport for. And this is all in reaction to the Biden administration's apparent proliferation at the border, which something like 10 million people crossed.
Yeah, like 10 to 11.
Yeah, during that.
11 and a half.
Yeah, during his administration. So there's a lot of people. So
yeah.
This is sort of the reaction to that in some ways. But still, the stated goal at the very beginning was, hey, we're going to have targeted enforcement because they're prioritizing, right? I don't think they, at least the stated goal in the beginning wasn't, hey, we're going to go after Joe Schmo at Home Depot. Well, that's what happened. They went after Joe Schmo at Home Depot.
Juan, you mean?
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. Juan Schmo at Home Depot. We just got canceled for that one right there. No, but to be transparent, right? The administration did say that the deportations in totality would also include people who are just here illegally and who may not have their criminal record. And so an example of that is, ICE would like to, in California specifically, ICE would like to go into the jails to, people who are arrested for especially violent crime. They'd like, and who have these immigration detainers, would like to go in and deport these people and take immigration enforcement action. But because California, there's a assembly bill, or it's a Senate bill, and one of the bills, it prohibits law enforcement from cooperating statewide with any immigration enforcement officials. So there's a extra steps involved into deporting someone who, for example, is in the jail, even though there is an ICE detainer on that person.
Right.
And so the administration says publicly, anyways, they say publicly that, hey, these states, these sanctuary states and cities, they don't allow us access into the jails. So therefore, we have to do investigations in the actual city, which obviously causes, calamity. And so if they go and they they go to a residence and they're doing a targeted investigation in a criminal who also has this immigration violation. If there's other immigrants who are here legally with that person, they're going to detain everybody and deport everyone. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, there's specific, when someone has, is here undocumented, right? If, new arrivals, based on some federal statutes, don't have the same privileges of getting like a whole hearing, getting that process to get relief for immigration. So if, people who've been here for a long time, especially if they're paying taxes, they have kids here that are U.S. citizens, the process is going to be a little bit different from them than someone who came in the last few years under the Biden administration. So yeah, that's sort of the context, the background, I think, which is important to understand what happened. Now, there was a lot. It seems like there's multiple flashpoints in L.A. specifically, flashpoints of ICE raids happening, and making these stops of people like, just regular people who are working at Home Depot or something. So it's interesting to see what's going on. It seems like the motivations or the original intent of the administration that was stated publicly has shifted, and these are the reactions to it. What are your thoughts? I need water.
A lot. Okay. I think it's historically important to note that, like, my dad was talking to us a little bit, or to you.
Yeah.
That in 1989, Reagan forgave like 3.1 million immigrants who were illegal. Mm-hmm. And it was a blanket, you're now cool to be here.
Peace.
Right? At the time that happened, the population was around 240 million.
Yeah.
Population today is closer to 350 million.
Yeah.
Amount of illegals back then in 89 would have been, I think it was like 2.
Yeah.
Plus or minus
a million.
These newfound 3.
Yeah.
Today, population's like 350 million.
Yeah.
And before Biden, it was sitting at like 10.
Yeah.
Now that number is closer to 20. So in percentages, right? Mm-hmm. It's still not quite at parity with the population.
Yeah.
But part of the question that Trump's administration is asking is this political issue between federal law, which Trump would want to enact, and states. And I think right now we're seeing this dance between them.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's been too many people who've died.
As far as I'm aware, no.
But there have been people deported.
Yeah.
For sure. I know of a couple cases that hit kind of immediately to people we know and people we know, schools, things of that nature.
Yeah, exactly.
We've seen it. It's happening. It's definitely also sending a sign to any illegals who are considering coming to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Don't come.
Yeah.
So that political statement is said, right? Now, the next sliver to this problem is a legal humanitarian question.
Yeah.
Is it right to do that? No. Right? Is it what the laws are dictating today? Yes. Mm-hmm. Is it the exact opposite of a previous administration? Yes.
Yeah.
and you're seeing that tension. And so LA is literally the Hollywood.
Yeah.
To see, unfortunate, if we're going to look at public perception of LAPD, public perception of having riots in LA.
Yeah.
Historically, knowing that this country likes to have riots based on race.
Yeah.
That we've had this kind of popcorn effect over the last century of race riots occurring.
Yeah. In Los Angeles specifically.
Some of which, if I just learned from listening to Joe Rogan's podcast with the director Ken Burns about Jack Johnson on July 4th in 1910. Jack Johnson won against Jim Jeffries, and the entire country erupted into race riots because a big black man defeated the big white herd in 15 rounds by knockout. And we had race riots in 25 states, 50 cities for the next couple days.
Yeah.
Slavery had happened 45 years ago.
Yeah.
We had a race riot. We had a race riot with Rodney King. We had a race riot in the 60s.
Yeah, it was Watts riots.
The Watts riots. Yeah. So we've had this history of having riots.
Not to mention George Floyd in 2020.
Not to mention George Floyd. Not to mention the historically, the reason why LA is the way it is because of the Spanish.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew this, but here's a little fun fact of LA.
Send it.
That why is downtown LA 22 miles away from the beach? Why isn't it right by the coast?
Educate me.
Because Spain figured out it's not good to have your capital city right next to the coast because pirates are going to always overrun it. So you want to have it far. You need to get on a horse, and it's going to be a trip.
Yeah.
22 miles is that exact trip.
Yeah. Is there anything significant about that number specifically or that distance?
Because that's what Spain figured out. Your horse needs to be able to have enough equipment to survive this 22-mile journey.
Yeah.
And you need to be ready to get there. So you need to have an entourage. It can't just be the fleet of one. You need to have a group.
Yeah.
A large brigade, perhaps, of
yeah.
ships, or whatever the correct military term for that is.
Zero clue. Naval frigates.
Sure. But LA gets developed the way it does because that's where the market is, Olivera Street.
Yeah.
That's where you could see commerce happening. And so that just naturally became home.
Yeah.
The hub. And that's how LA starts developing, coming outwards.
Yeah.
It's the Spanish. It's not the Mexican. It's the Spanish.
Yeah, exactly.
Then it becomes part of Mexico once the Spanish are out.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't get defended when the Americans are running east. So this is a constant, place of
flux.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now we're seeing people who are upset at how things are happening.
Yeah.
And then the why.
Yeah.
Because if previously it was okay to come and now your family could come if that was the case, now it's not the case. And just that swift of a hap, it's happened.
Exactly.
And most people aren't comfortable with change.
It's a fair point.
So we're seeing all of this come to a crux. Now, I think Newsom wants to become president.
If that isn't apparent, it's definitely apparent now.
And if he can get Trump into some sort of a court case against him, that's his platform now.
Yeah.
Trump might be okay with that because he's got nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see this massive take of sending in the National Guard, kind of also sending a big FU to that whole establishment.
Yeah.
You can't run your city. There are riots. If I want to take the next slant to this, Trump is trying to have his bigger, better bill run.
Yeah.
In there are some pretty extreme immigration ideas that they want to enact.
Yeah.
Federally. And I think to do that, here's your fire.
Yeah.
And he's coming in saying we're going to put it out with the National Guard, with the National Guard and the Marines. Because you can't control it. Because if Trump hadn't sent the National Guard, if Trump isn't sending the Marines, what would happen in LA?
It's a good question.
If this city historically has a tendency to want to burn itself.
Yeah.
Because there's no resources naturally here. We are in a desolate desert.
Yeah.
Because everything has to come to us here.
Yeah.
Without it, we're screwed. That's part of that problem.
Mm-hmm.
That I think the Trump administration knew we can expose. Kind of the next sliver.
Yeah.
Is June 13th. June 14th is the day that the Navy is celebrating their 250th anniversary.
Yeah.
And they're going to have a big parade in Washington.
Yeah.
Down the White House. And Trump's birthday also happens to be the same day.
Did not know that.
So there's this big thing that a lot of people aren't happy about because this is going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it's Trump's birthday and it's the Navy's birthday. We have a problem there. If you're a leftist looking at this saying, how can we let this happen while this is happening in LA?
Yeah.
That's another sliver to this pie.
Yeah.
The next sliver to this pie, a huge sliver that I think not everybody's looking at because we're literally on the inside looking in.
Yeah.
We're not on the outside.
Yeah.
Macro, micro. We need to think that way now.
Absolutely.
What's going on with China? We're trying to negotiate with China.
Yeah.
And so let's put ourselves in the position of China. If what's happening in China was happening in Shanghai, what would be the president's move? Probably the same thing. I'm sending the military.
Yeah.
I'm sending the National Guard. I'm sending in my resources to stop this, to contain it. And we've seen this in Hong Kong. Hong Kong wants to have their own little problem.
Yeah.
Okay, watch. Here's the military. Here's the police.
I think if I remember correctly, too, China really paused before sending the military into Hong Kong. And that partially because lessons from 89 in Tiananmen Square, the images that came out of there with the military was pretty damning, I think. And I mean, those images are still really powerful today. Like you think Tank Man, for example.
Absolutely.
So the lesson, I mean, they wanted to use heightened police force in Hong Kong. But I think they did send military, right? Eventually. Because, I mean, there's like 1 million protesters. I think the interesting thing, too, especially in Hong Kong, if my memory jogs right, it wasn't riotous for the most part, right?
Right.
Okay.
Not sure, but
I'm pretty sure. I mean, I'm not to say that there was no violence that broke out, period. I mean, you get 1 million people upset about something. Something is bound to pop off. Like, that's just the reality. But, it's interesting. Interesting to bring that comparison in.
And so if you're part of Trump's team, you want to have this position of strength going into this negotiating table saying, hey, we acted like you. We're not that different. We need to come to an agreement here. It's literally, we are peons being moved here just so that we can negotiate trade. Because what's so important about LA? It's the port.
Yeah.
The airport. The one near Long Beach.
Yeah.
That's what connects us to Asia. We also have San Francisco and Oakland.
Yeah.
So if you don't stop what happens in LA and you let it spread, and now you have mass issues in Washington, Seattle.
Yeah.
It's the same place, is it?
Yeah.
Houston. Now we're hitting all the ports.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of partially the reason for such a strong,
quick response too.
Because we need to show strength.
Yeah.
We're about to negotiate.
That's a interesting point.
Now, not that long ago, Elon and Trump separated.
Yeah. Unceremonious breakup.
So this is another slice of this pie, which is if Elon separates himself from Trump, now it looks like they're kind of trying to forgive each other.
Yeah.
But Elon is, I'm no longer part of this administration. I'm no longer with you. I don't agree with what you're doing.
Yeah.
He's already asked, do we want to start a third party?
Yeah.
If there's a third party, sounds like Elon's going to be behind that.
Yeah.
If I'm going to ask, why were all these tech CEOs near the president when he was being inaugurated? Is it because of Elon or something greater?
I mean, it probably something greater.
And that greater power, his name is J.D. Vance.
Mm.
They're all friends.
Yeah.
They all know each other because they all work in tech.
Yeah.
And so there is a conspiracy in this pie, because there has to be.
As there always is.
Which
we're not afraid to discuss here on the Below the Trees podcast, just saying.
If Trump is now the one who looks like the fool because he's upset most of this country, which is Latinos, or soon to be most of this country, Latinos, then who's the next guy? If Trump gets impeached, if Newsom wins, if anyone else wins, and Trump has to go down, who's the next guy? It has to be Vance.
Yeah.
And so maybe this is all just part of that entire elaborate play.
Yeah.
Of Elon coming in, trying to make a change, showing that there's difficulty, even with an administration that, you know, the lefts would say Elon paid to be there, which Soros pays to be there too.
Yeah, exactly.
And so now we're seeing this whole thing potentially play out on that conspiracy sliver of this pie.
Yeah.
But the whole truth of everything that's happening with ICE is sad.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is a country of immigrants.
Yeah.
Legal or illegal.
Yeah.
It is immigrants. The question is, how come the system couldn't figure out how to accept them, in a sense, to bring in more people in a more coordinated effort?
Yeah.
That's the politics. That's what has to be negotiated. And so you're going to continue seeing these fluxes from different administrations until something is done.
Yeah, something comprehensive and
so if this is Trump's moment to say, this is when I'm going to do it, and this is when we're, as an entire nation, decide.
Yeah.
We'll see.
You know, it's interesting to say that. My hope is, because this seems to be, like you said, I mean, the Biden administration was on the total opposite side of what the Trump administration is doing. And, you know, they're basically like negative reflections of each other in some ways. So my hope is that with that, we can come back to some sort of middle ground, you know, where there could be some sort of comprehensive policy. Because I think most people are, you know, whether they want to admit it or not, and most people would probably argue this is a good thing or not. I don't know. But most people are probably in the center of every single issue that is important in today's United States, right? Especially immigration. I think, generally speaking, most people would say, you know what, you know, if there's someone who's out here who's not here illegally, but who's working hard, doing, having a family, has, integrated with the American society. Immigrants pay taxes, right? Even income taxes to federal and state. There's processes for that. And I would argue that most people say that person probably belongs here, right? We don't want to mess with that person. We would like to give them an opportunity to integrate into society, because who knows why they came in the first place or when they came. You know what I mean? So if someone's been here and has integrated with society in a meaningful way, which I would say is a majority of people, I think the regular lay person is probably going to be in favor of not removing them speciously, or especially fucking ICE just going into Home Depots and places of work like that to jam someone up. On the flip side, I think most Americans too would probably say, yeah, if this guy has been convicted of a litany of different crimes, state crimes like robbery, homicide, whatever the case may be, I think most people say, hey, if they're here illegally, let's get them out. Or if they're part of a criminal gang, or whatever the case may be. Now, I think, we still have to be the better versions of ourselves and verify that information, right? Like, if we can't just go and label people criminal gang members and, okay, that gives us the authority. I think still need your due diligence, good evidence to presume as much, right? But still, it's like, I think my hope is that maybe there's a silver lining here, that reasonable people can come back into the room and find a center ground policy that kind of appeases everyone a little bit. Because I'm definitely the same way. I don't feel like we should target people who might be here illegally but have been here for 30 years in a time where, because it's kind of inconsistent, right? Just like you said, every administration is going to have a slightly different policy, or a different policy altogether, extremely radically different policy. But if you came at a time where it was like almost encouraged, there wasn't any rails or guards for you coming, and you've been here for 20 or 30 years, to me it seems a little inconsistent. Now, hey, we allowed you to stay for this long, but it's time to beat feet, pal. Unless there's some sort of other criminal aspect to it, like it's confusing, and it's really confusing. And I think something needs to be done to make the policy more cohesive. What that is, who knows? It's going to have to be discussed and determined. But I think your framework, that pie of the different slices that are involved, is pretty interesting, though.
There's more. Absolutely.
And you have more, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, for sure. But I think
there's more slices.
I know. You got a whole pie. But I'm just responding. You know what I mean? But yeah, okay, well, let's get into more pie. What's the next slice?
Something that's worth understanding for this pie is, if you are illegal, there is a process to become legal. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of filling out paperwork, doing the documentation, paying fines, fees, whatever they call them. But there is a path. And if you fail to do that, and you've been here for 30 years, that's on you, though.
Yeah.
Because you weren't seeking your freedom under your constitutional right. You know that there is a path.
Yeah.
But you chose not to do it.
That's an interesting question, too.
That's on you. Now, for all the people who are currently protesting, saying that Mexico is better and waving the Mexican flag.
Yeah.
Of the people that I do know who are Mexican, they don't want to go back.
Yeah.
They're like, I know what that means. I know what that is.
Yeah.
And for me, someone who my family is from Nicaragua.
Yeah.
I know what that looks like when I go home.
Yeah.
And I know what that feels like because I have family there.
Yeah.
And so it's completely a whole other aspect than what it is in this country.
Yeah.
You don't get that freedom unless you're here.
That's
you have an ability to become someone or something greater should you want to do the work.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do the work, meaning fill out the paperwork,
yeah,
then maybe you don't deserve to be here.
It's an interesting component of it, yeah.
That's another little sliver.
Yeah.
Because of the people that I do know, they're all legal here because they want to be here, and they're purposely saying, I want this freedom.
Yeah.
You see, that's the difference.
Yeah. And you know what? So this, before you continue to the next piece of the pie, this is a good framework, I think, that hopefully people get value out of. I think that's something I'm struggling with a little bit, watching everything unfold, because, I have a pretty kind of similar background to you. It's not exactly the same, but I definitely have family who migrated here from another country in Central America. I won't say. I think I've said it before, Honduras, right? So there is an aspect of it, like, where you feel pretty torn, right? Because I think the instant gut human reaction is watching something transpire like these ICE raids. Your gut reaction is man, this is not right, right? There's something wrong about this, and especially knowing, having the background and having kind of like towing the line a little bit, just your whole life, right? But then on other component too, watching some of these protests unfold. And not just these protests, but basically all the protests really for the last 5 years, it seems like there's this consistent anti-American sentiment, which is fine. If that's someone's belief, they hate this country. Like, I'm the first one to say, like, okay, that's your prerogative. Like, you have the freedom to live in a country where you can hate the country you live in, and that's okay. Like, I might disagree with you on the principle, but I don't disagree with your ability to hold that belief. The problem is, what I see, at least the irony of it, is, like you said, people are waving flags of other countries, knowing that damn well they don't want to go to those other places, and they will do anything in their power to not go to those places, right? Or if you have citizens saying, oh, I want to leave the United States because of Trump, or whatever the case may be. By all means, go. There was a Green Day, Billy Joe Armstrong. He was in the UK, and I forget, it was a few years ago. He made some speech during a concert that he renounced his citizenship to the United States. And that kind of struck me the wrong way for several reasons. And number one, I disagree with the principle, right? If you want to renounce your citizenship and move, that's all you do it.
Sure.
But I don't necessarily agree with your point of view. That's fair. We can have a different agreement on that opinion. But the other component is like all these people who keep saying, I want to leave, I'm going. They're all fucking wealthy and have the power to go do that. So it's like, how do you spit on the face of the people that you support? Because now you can just say, well, fuck this country, I'm out.
Yeah.
And that, the left always talks about, like, privilege is a lefty buzzword. It's like, well, all these people are exercising their privilege, quote unquote, when they say, I want to leave this country. And most of them don't. Some do. Yeah. But it's like, okay, if you really want to leave, then do it. Like, who's stopping you? I don't think anyone's stopping you. And on the transverse of that, it's like, having been to other countries, nothing super gnarly, but having seen other places, it's like, I wholly don't believe, even in Europe, right? The rights and privileges to free speech is pretty muted compared to what we have here.
100%.
I remember years ago, especially after all the Islamist terrorist attacks in France, they made a law on the books that said women can't wear, the Muslim garb, the burqa, in public.
Yeah.
Like, think about that. If something like that happened in the United States, that would be there would be so much backlash to that.
Right.
But in France, it is what it is. Like, if you don't like it, we're gonna fucking Get out. You know what I mean? So, and even in the UK, like there's free speech laws like that don't exist. If you say something online that might
offend the king, or
might offend someone, oh God, you could have the police come knocking on your door.
Right.
I think freedom of speech isn't absolute in the sense that there is some speech that could be considered criminal, right? Like if you're inciting violence, and what you did directly led to that violence. I don't think a politician saying, go protest, I don't think that's inciting violence, but or is a criminal speech. But someone like the whole example of a fire in a burning theater or whatever, like, yeah, you probably can't do that. I think that's criminal speech, right? But just the fact that we live in a place where you can fly another flag, you can say whatever you want, you can do. Some of these rioters are going to get arrested, and there's going to be no charges down the line, and the behavior is abdicated and condoned. I mean, that's what the message is, right? And so it just, that irony, like the extreme empathy I have for all the people who I think may be targeted wrongly, or I might disagree with their arrests, that feeling of empathy and sometimes sadness is brushed up against that feeling of disgust for people whose behavior I think is reprehensible, and they're not going to be, it's going to be condoned and excused. And if there's no consequences, like what's to say it doesn't continue to happen, right? And you look at all these videos in LA in general, like some of the behavior over the last few years, like
it's been crazy.
And what's the response? Like, who knows? So
it's okay.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That's the response. That's what the politicians tell you.
Yeah.
Like you were stating to me, I don't know who's the one that said it earlier, but don't pay attention to what you're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
exactly. And that's what we were talking off camera about this a little bit. And I think that's probably the most frustrating part too, is that obviously when there's social unrest, and that's not to take away anything from the people who are out there. There was a really beautiful protest at City Hall where it was people carrying, Mexican flags, American flags, and they were dancing, singing, and protesting. I think, to me, that was a powerful image, because now you have the police line. The police are just standing there holding, prohibiting access into City Hall just in case there is sort of any violence erupt, but they're not engaging with the protesters. Right. and state-sanctioned violence, right? The protesters are, I think, getting a really powerful message across, and that's a good thing. So I'm 100% for that, right? But then whenever you have mass gatherings of people who are upset about a particular issue, it's almost, you can almost expect violence to break out in some capacity, right? Now, how much of that violence is organized and orchestrated by bad actors? That's a good question too.
That's another conspiracy.
Yeah,
that's another slice to this pie.
Well, what's interesting too is the some of the major backers. I mean, you got to wonder, like, where do all these signs come from on hour zero, day one?
Where do the bricks come from?
and it's interesting. This last week, one of the leaders for the SEIU union, I forget his first name, but Huerta, he got arrested, and there is that labor component involved too, organized labor. So there's all these big questions that I have.
And we've been having protests in LA fairly recently.
I mean, yeah, exactly. There's protests all the time.
Palestine, is another big issue.
Yeah.
Going back to this pie, because there's still a couple things.
Well, just to kind of close the point on what I was making here, to close the loop there.
Loop it up.
The thing that kills me the most, I think that frustrates me the most, despite all the pies, is kind of what your dad said, that this is a political snafu.
Oh, no, yeah, 100%.
And when you have politicians, I'm thinking specifically of Maxine Waters, going on the air and going live and saying, there's no violence. No one was shot and killed. Everything's okay. Don't believe your eyes. I feel like the character from They Live, where I put the glasses on, and then everyone around me is a fucking from outer space, and are taking over the country, taking over and killing people.
Yeah.
I just feel like, and this is the thing that frustrated me about the last riots too. It's like they were telling you to not trust your own eyes because you don't have the ability to see what's going on, and it's all a fucking lie anyways, right? And I hate that. That drives me nuts, and I feel like, I saw a great video this morning, and it was is a comedian that I really like, a Mexican comedian, and he basically played a caricature of all the different races: white, black, Hispanic, Asian, and all of them coming to the recognition, hey, not all of us are bad, not all of us are good. Why are we all at each other's throat? And then they all turn to the news media and politicians like, that's the enemy right there, because that's who are driving. At least I see driving some of the wedges between people.
100%.
And it's frustrating.
It's what's viral.
It's what's viral, exactly. Next pie.
It's what's viral, and it's taking away from the gays.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a gay parade because of this.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've now had to cancel stuff.
Yeah.
But the city is definitely not in the right moment to have a gay parade.
Yeah.
So that's another issue. I don't hear much about either.
Yeah.
Because with this, that doesn't happen. This is supposed to be Gay Pride Month, and also supposed to be Father's Day.
Yeah.
And like I said, another conspiracy in this slice of the pie is tomorrow there's going to be mass riots.
Yeah. It's the day of protests.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because it's also Navy and Trump's birthday.
Yeah.
Which leads to the next slice of pie, which is the left needs something like this to try to unite its party, its base, to basically say, clearly Trump is the boogeyman, and so you need to come with us, all you Latins.
Yeah.
And we're going to take care of you. We're going to represent you. We're going to fight for you.
Yeah.
And this is where, if you're on that left, they're going to try to capture the Latino vote.
Yeah.
Because that's the next big piece.
Yeah.
For that voting base.
That block.
That this Democratic Party actually has no leadership currently.
Yeah.
Because where's Kamala? Where's Biden in all this?
Haven't done my Kamala laugh in a while.
That's another slice.
Yeah.
Third slice. Why do we need immigrants in a state like California? Number one, the obvious one is the labor force.
Yeah.
We do rely heavily on literally the backs of Latinos to make California's economy what it is.
Fourth largest economy in the world.
One. Huge one.
Yeah.
Necessary evil. Just like on that Joe Rogan podcast, crazy quote talking to George Washington about slavery.
Yeah.
Where he says, it's like holding on to a wolf by its ears. You don't want to let it go, and you have to keep holding on.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
Until somebody makes a shift. But right now we're seeing this schism.
Yeah.
And it's necessary for the economy, but it's also necessary for the income, in the sense of your rent for these landlords is based off of that.
Yeah.
Because there are more people and less places, the rent goes up.
Exactly.
You get rid of all these illegals, what do you think is going to happen to the rent?
Go down.
It's going to crash.
Yeah.
That's another reason you don't want to get rid of your illegals. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, the reality too is every group is a market dynamic, and just immigrants here who are undocumented and here illegally, they're just as participatory in the market as anyone else. And they're a huge group.
Right.
Especially, when you look at where migrants tend to coalesce in areas that are like Los Angeles. I mean, it's a huge percentage of the population. They have a huge market force behind them.
And the message right now is don't come.
Yeah.
Don't come to LA. You can't. It's crazy. It's on lockdown.
Yeah, dude, it's a lot. There's a lot to take in, and I think it was good that we broke it down in ways that aren't just black and white. You know what I mean? Because it's not black and white. I think this is a very complicated issue with a lot of drivers, a lot of motivations, and and hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully, we come to some sort of resolution. But is there any more to this pie?
See if I covered it. Police.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a law that if you had somebody who was illegal, it would just show up as part of that profile.
Yeah.
That legislation makes it so that the left hand and the right hand aren't talking to each other.
Exactly.
This is now coming from us as a country when historically Texas famously sent a bunch of illegals to Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
And say, what are you guys going to do about it? Because your legislation is letting this happen.
Yeah.
We're now seeing that play out in LA.
Yeah.
That's that other piece. And again, going back to, I think this might be the final piece.
Mm-hmm.
Many Republicans, especially here in California, who are seeing this play out, are now looking at Trump and saying, this is not what I voted for.
Yeah.
And so now they're turning on Trump, which leads to that conspiracy of maybe everybody's in to try to get him to do something stupid.
Yeah.
So that he can then get impeached.
Yeah. I mean, there are already politicians talking about articles of impeachment based on this.
I mean, the whole way forward for him has been through court.
Yeah.
So, it's just another piece of this whole thing, because it's all just fucking politics.
Yeah, and that's the shitty part, dude.
Because this country doesn't function without immigration.
Yeah.
This country doesn't function with immigration. You have illegals.
Mm-hmm.
Just natural fact of existing. If you want to have a country, you need borders.
Exactly.
If you want to have a house, you have to have 4 walls. So if you want to have a country, you need to have a border.
Yeah.
This is kind of a quote from Naval that I'm slicing and dicing it, but this is essentially what it is.
Yeah.
And so if you want to have that identity,
mm-hmm.
then you need to play by some sort of laws to govern that border.
Yeah.
So if you don't come in legally, then those laws should say what to do next.
Yeah.
Final piece.
Here it is.
It is very profitable for these third-party administrators who are deporting people.
Yeah.
It's a multitude of companies that are making lots of money every time they deport someone. However, there's not enough resources to deport the same amount of people that entered under the Biden administration, because that was a number that's sitting around 8,000 people a day.
Yeah.
So the equivalent would be you got to take out 8,000 people a day for the next 4 years to get those numbers back down
to where they were.
Yeah. But like I already said, it's not privy to the same statistical percentage as it did with Reagan.
Yeah.
We need more illegals in that sense.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to kind of bring up too is I think the way border crossings and illegal border crossings happened are controlled now and during the Biden administration are fundamentally different how they were 20, 30 years ago, right? Yeah. You got to figure that in the 8 to 10 million border crossings that happened illegally under the Biden administration, it just wasn't, I mean, obviously a huge number is from Latin America, right? Central America, Mexico,
everywhere.
But yeah, this the proliferation. We saw record numbers of Chinese illegal immigration, African illegal immigration, even European illegal immigration. Like there was records never seen before. That you got to wonder, like, what's the cause of that?
Right.
And then the other part of that too is that who controls that, right?
Right.
Now, by all accounts, the cartel has a very has monopolized border crossings. Different cartel organizations.
It's great business.
It's a huge business model. And what's interesting too is what we learned from the previous administration is that you have cartels who basically they funnel all these people through as a distraction through the desert. And so because of the Biden administration policies that anyone just saying, hey, I have claiming an asylum, they have to get processed. Now you get all the traffickers, drug manufacturers, sending their product into the U.S. undisturbed rather. And so there's that aspect of it too, that this, a lot of what the border crossings that happened under the Biden administration just weren't regular Joe Schmoes who are, making this challenge on their own. It was an organized affair that, unfortunately people were trafficked, right? And you have a wide scale human trafficking along the southern border, especially. And, how much of that can we tolerate? You know what I mean?
Right.
And part of that human trafficking component, I won't say it's any specific, but I do know of accounts where
that's a problem.
Yeah, not only is it a problem, but you have people coming to the border who, saying, "Hey, this is my daughter, this is my son," and come to find out that they're not related at all. This is a sexual sort of like child type molesting relationship, or this child is being trafficked for the purposes of sex.
Right.
Like, as much as the left doesn't want to admit that, that is a reality.
Happens.
And so to me, that's not a left or right issue. That's a humanitarian issue.
Right.
And I think when we talk about,
and you can't help them.
Yeah. Right. But when we talk about immigration in this capacity, I think you have to be honest about it on all sides. Right. We can say, hey, people are coming here to build a better life. Sure. I wholly recognize that. But then at the same time, there are people coming here who don't have good intentions or who are doing criminal behavior that needs to be addressed. And so you said the nail on the head. In order for a country to be a country, you have to have borders. You have to have sovereignty. There's no country on the planet worth its salt who don't control its borders to some degree.
Europe.
Exactly.
Europe doesn't.
I met a guy years ago.
They're starting to.
Yeah. Well, Europe's a complex one. Maybe we could get into another pie on another episode. But I met a guy who's from the United States. He was a soldier. He ended up leaving the military, stayed in Europe illegally. He just wandered, avoided detection or whatever, but he was homeless in Europe. It's so interesting to me how this played out, and watching how this plays out in the United States is just different, or at least the perception is that it should be different. So this guy, homeless guy in the Netherlands, ends up falling asleep on a bench, gets contacted by police. The next day, he's on his flight back to the United States. Like, I'm sorry that I understand where the Danish, the Netherlands, the government, right? I understand where they're coming from, because that's how you maintain your country, right? You can't have unchecked immigration on such a massive scale. So that kind of made me feel like when he told me the story, like, oh, we don't do that here, or we should, the perception is that we shouldn't do that here, right? And so I think when you talk about this conversation, and this is why I think, again, this very valuable episode is that you have to look at it from all these different angles, because there's a lot at play here. But then you also have to recognize too that there's good and bad, and you have to be honest about what each situation is.
Just like I find it super fascinating that Kash Patel was on Joe Rogan's podcast on the same day that JD Vance is on Theo Von's podcast. And I missed that. This is days before the riots start.
Yeah.
That's another interesting aspect. Another fun one, this pie that I forgot, is the Waymo.
Oh, yeah.
5 Waymos, and I don't know if more.
4 Waymo. I'm not too sure how many. Yeah. My understanding is they were called, and I could be wrong on some of the facts, but the factual accounts of what occurred. But my understanding is people called Waymo to these locations and just vandalized them.
Yeah, sure. But that's vandalizing AI, right?
Yeah.
While quietly 2 other things happen, one in the U.S. and another one abroad.
What happened?
Elon's robotaxi network went live in Texas.
Yeah. Which
is huge.
Yeah.
Because none of the other state regulations like California will allow it. So far only Texas.
Yeah.
And that started in June. That's also at the same time that Trump and Elon have their honeymoon phase.
Ended.
Disappearance.
Yeah.
Into the moonlight.
Into the moonlight.
To then, now, you threw me off.
No, sorry. To then now, honeymoon phase over. To then now,
Elon's starting AI fully.
Yeah.
Now I remember. Israel bombing.
Oh, yeah.
Iran.
Yeah.
Again, going back to that negotiation with China.
Yeah.
And Russia.
Yeah.
To try to negotiate Ukraine. And our tariffs. Well, burn, baby, burn. Disco Inferno.
Yeah.
But we can't let it completely get burnt.
Yeah.
So right now the optics are pretty wild, though.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, chaos ensues everywhere.
Everywhere, dude. It's pretty crazy, dude. It just sucks because you want, I think most people just want to live in peace. Most people want to live their lives without any interruption from the government, from major corporations. I think just people would like peace, but
you can, so long as you follow all of its rules, laws, regulations.
Sure.
Code of conduct.
Whatever. Sure. No, I mean not, but I mean, in the United States, though, at least stated, right, we do have some pretty deep and embedded freedoms that other countries don't enjoy. But yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. I think most people would like to live without these concerns. But then something I just thought of now is like, how much of that is just truly online? You know what I mean?
What do you mean truly online?
So obviously what's happening in real time is happening, right?
Sure. I drove by it twice.
Yeah. This is not to take away from what's actually going on.
Yeah.
But I mean, how much of what because obviously there's not every single person, as far as a recent poll came out, for example, it's something like 59% of Americans agree with this policy, Trump administration policy. It's a poll. Who knows how accurate or if it's truly representative, whatever. But my point is that the actual number of people out there and doing and causing trouble and actual number of, like, I think the ICE raids, right? Those are grossly mischaracterized by number. I mean, you're talking hundreds of agents. You're not talking about ICE as a 15,000 person agency out in the streets of LA, right?
Yeah.
When they talk about the National Guard and the Marine Corps, you're talking not full deployment of multiple battalions. You're talking 2,000 National Guards troops. You're talking several hundred Marines in a county
like
of
700.
Yeah, in a county of 8 to 10 million people, right? Like, so some of it
to guard a downtown that's no more than like 8 streets.
I think, yeah. Karen Bass, she had a press conference and she was like, "Hey, we have curfew for downtown LA. LA's 500 square miles. This is affecting an area that's 1 square mile. So that this is what I mean, that maybe it's kind of grossly made bigger and a scarier monster by the internet, in the fact that we're talking about less than 5,000 fucking military, probably less than 3,000 total military. We're talking obviously a few thousand police officers, and we're talking probably a few thousand protesters in an area that's the size of 1 square mile.
Right.
And this isn't like, obviously some of the imagery is terrible, right? Even with the protesters, some of the imagery is really bad. And again, I hate when politicians tell me to not believe my eyes. But also at the point when you're on Instagram and you're constantly seeing all the shit that's going on, I think that has the ability to inflate how big a scale something is, right? And I could be totally off base on this. I could be wrong. Obviously, other cities are experiencing. I saw Chicago had protests, New York had protests. Like it, not to say it hasn't spread to other cities, but I mean, we're still talking about, like, even New York is a city of, like, however many 12, 15 million people.
Right.
I think most people just want to live their lives. I saw an interesting video. It made me laugh. It was like a man bun wearing soy boy dude and some short hair white lady, both white, and they were blocking traffic, morning traffic. There's a group of protesters, probably 20, 30, just blocking the street. And a black woman comes up and she says, "Can you guys get out of the street? Like, I got to go to work. I have to take my kids to school. I got to do all these things." And she's just saying, "I just need to get by." And the white guy says, "Oh, you got to go to work? Oh." And I could just imagine if that guy's political persuasion was that more consistent with like a Republican, for example, because he was there to protest the ICE raids, the outcry would be very different. We would have had whole think pieces from the New Yorker about modern day racism based on that video alone. So it's just interesting to me, like some of these videos that are popping up.
Yeah, I just like you're saying, I would wonder if you are a journalist for any of these big stream medias, are you forced to cover this now?
Probably. I mean, they all have
more than likely.
Yeah, they all have their editors and what the priorities are.
A quota of things to write about. So I'm just wondering, how much are we going to see about this from now into the future? And I'm willing to bet.
Yeah.
Quite a lot, because the Democrats need this.
Well, I mean, so that's the one thing I will continue to say about postmodernists, that they hit the nail on the head, that you control how people think based on how you write.
Sure.
And how you document something. And that the postmodernists are totally correct in that, in the sense that you can really, with your narrative, move public opinion. And so, yeah, it doesn't surprise me, like, when you see the language, like, obviously these are journalists, right? These are professional writers
professional persuaders,
exactly, who, are pushing whatever editorial message
whatever narrative they're told to tell.
Exactly. And, which is interesting, because I just finished watching, I watched Citizen Kane recently.
Okay.
And it was just like, oh man, this is like, it's just so interesting to me how poignant that movie still is. Even though, I mean, obviously it's covering yellow journalism and what is truth and what should be relayed to the people, and almost like it doesn't matter how that truth is told, but it needs to be told, whether it's factual or not. And obviously that was about, moguls, magnates of the day, journalists, like William Randolph Hearst, for example. But it just seems to me, man, like that's so, like, journalists and the news media are so quick to just get the story out there that they don't care if it's true or not.
Yeah. I mean, this is all politics.
Exactly.
So I know a story of Lincoln. He's running for, I think it's like mayor or senator.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he basically says to the biggest newspaper, like days before the election, he's just like, I won. You knew that? And he's just like, no, I don't know. How? And he's like, because the other guy died. Yeah. So he writes the newspaper that Lincoln won because the other guy died. They publish it, and that affects the entire thing because the guy's like, it takes him a week to respond.
Yeah.
To say, no, I'm not dead. And by that time, it's too late.
Yeah.
You already lost the election.
Yeah.
Politics, baby.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's age old, tale as old as time.
That's the leader of the Republican Party.
Yeah. Tale
Good
as
old
old
Lincoln.
as time, dude. Yeah, but and that's what's so fascinating to me too about journalism is the professionalization of journalism was a response to the salaciousness of yellow journalism of the 19th and early 20th century.
Right.
But it's really not any different. It just has a degrees attached now from fancy institutions, but the outcome is the same because it's so what's the word I'm looking for? It's so intimately connected with politics that how do you escape that?
It's in that same interview with Ken Burns.
Mm-hmm. You sent that to me. I didn't get a chance to watch it yet.
You should watch it while you're on your flight. That's why I sent it to you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. He says, I don't remember who's the one that says this, but it's just like Jesus never did his teachings to try to make it a religion. As we're talking about, it's the writers who write the Bible to make it so.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful quote. It's a pretty powerful quote. Ah, what a day. What a time to be alive. John, I think on that note,
we're done with the pie.
We are done with the pie.
For now.
And our first ever emergency podcast. Sound the alarms. No, but I just to kind of button everything up and recap it before we close. This is obviously more than meets the eye, and I think anyone who watches this video should take one thing. It's just to be a critical thinker about what's going on. Right? Don't fall into any one camp blindly, because there is a lot going on here that is more nuanced, and I think either side they're is willing to admit right. Whatever rank and file, front of the line people, I think they're not willing to admit that this is not just a black and white issue. It's very complicated. Like you said, there's the macro and micro elements to it that, when kind of put into sum, you can see how this is transpiring, how it's all unfolding. So I think the message that I have at the end here, though, is whoever's out there, whether you're protesting or first responders and the military guys and whoever, like the people on the lines right now, just everyone, I hope everyone stays safe, right? Again, I saw that protest in front of LA City Hall where it was really, I think the images coming out of there were more powerful in a positive way than they were in a negative way.
Sure.
And I hope to see more of that than the rioting. But I also hope, I hope our law enforcement exercises some restraint and doesn't get carried away, because in those instances it seems like it's probably pretty easy to get carried away. So hope they maintain their professionalism as well. And yeah, just stay safe out there, everybody. Shit, it's a wild time.
Don't forget your masks, everybody.
Don't forget your masks. Wait, is COVID coming back? Whoa, bleep that. I meant
now you're thinking.
I meant something else. Yeah, don't forget. There you go. Oh man. Well, on that note, I think let's wrap this up. John, it was a pleasure talking to you today on our first ever emergency podcast. Okay. This is the Below the Trees podcast. Thank you for joining us on today's episode. We hope you got something out of it, and looking forward to seeing you on the next one. This is episode 21, which puts us in the top 90th percentile of all podcasts that ever existed to this day. And I'm very proud of that. I think, John, you're probably pretty proud of that too. So for the 10 people that watched our last video and the 45 fans we have, subscribers, thank you so much. We enjoy doing this, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. This is the Below Trees podcast.